Welcome to this first episode of our AARP 2023 virtual series on brain health. Today's program is Demystifying Dementia and the Six Pillars of Brain Health. And I'm Lisa Dedden Cooper, Manager of Advocacy with the AARP Michigan office. And I am looking forward to being your host for the next 4 weeks as we dive into what everyone at every age should be aware of, what we should all know about regarding brain health and dementia, and what we can all do to be more empowered on behalf of ourselves and our friends and our family and our communities. Issues involving brain health are a priority for AARP because we know that they're on the minds and they're impacting the lives of more and more of our members across the country. For this first episode, we're going to equip you with the basics. Dr. Surrey Eaton, who is an AARP volunteer, is going to talk with us about what dementia is and how you can recognize it if you or a loved one might have some type of dementia, and how you can go about taking some steps, becoming empowered. And then Joy Spahn, who is also an AARP volunteer, is going to talk with us about what AARP and the Global Council on Brain Health refer to as the 6 pillars of brain health. Choices and lifestyle changes each of us can make, regardless of our age, to optimize our brain health as we age. And then for the rest of the hour today, we're going to take your questions live. So we want to hear from you. So if you have questions or comments that you think of during today's program, please feel free to type them in the chat box that you see on your screen just below the video here. Then after we've heard both of our speakers today, we're going to answer as many of your questions as possible live. We know that when AARP sends surveys and people respond to us telling us what's most important to them, one of the issues that routinely rates at or near the top of their concerns is staying mentally sharp as they age. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Our goal today is for you to leave this program feeling more empowered and hopeful than you started out. And then in weeks 2, 3, and 4 of this series, we're going to bring in other doctors and experts from around the country to talk with us, including the head of the Penn Memory Center, the head of Michigan's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, researchers from that Global Council on Brain Health, and people who are themselves currently living well with dementia, all of whom will share their wisdom and advice. But now it's my great honor to introduce our guest today. We'll hear from Dr. Surrey Eaton. And Dr. Eaton has been a family physician for over 37 years. She earned her bachelor's degree from Howard University and her medical degree from Michigan State University. And she was employed by Sparrow Health System until her retirement in 2014. She's active in the community not only as a volunteer for AARP, but also for the Capital Area Health Alliance and a great many service organizations. And fun fact, one of the ways that she stays active is by playing pickleball, which I was lucky enough to receive a lesson from her in pickleball just a few weeks ago. And then we'll hear from Joy Spahn. Joy retired in 2020 after serving for 14 years as the West Michigan Regional Director for the Alzheimer's Association Greater Michigan Chapter. She earned her bachelor's degree from Grand Valley State University and her master's in Public Administration and Healthcare from Western Michigan University. In addition to her volunteer work with AARP, Joy is on the advisory board for the Michigan State University Center for Contextual Factors in Alzheimer's Disease, and she's a co-facilitator for a National Council of Dementia Minds group, and she serves in many other roles too. You can read their full bios, as well as my own, by clicking on the Overview tab on your screen, just below where your video is playing. So, again, a reminder, if you have questions or comments as we are talking today, please type them into the chat box so we can answer them after we've heard from both of our presenters. But let's dive in. Dr. Eaton, can you kick things off for us by telling us what we need to know about dementia, or what's sometimes also known as adult cognitive decline?
Certainly. Thank you, Lisa. And I am going to get us started with talking about what dementia is, some things that you may or may not know regarding dementia. Um, I'll go to the first slide.
All right,
First of
let's see if we can get the producers. We'll switch over and we just want to be showing Saray, Dr.
all,
Eaton on the screen along with the slides at this point. And I don't see the slides up there. So let's see if we can get those. No, we've got those showing. As those are coming up, though, we want to also call your attention as we are waiting for the slides to come up and Saray's part of the presentation to start. You can again look under your screen and you'll see there are a number of tabs that are available for you to open up. And there are resource documents there that you can open up. And there are also our bios. And one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit more is a poll question that we put up there when we talk about the 6 pillars of brain health. You may or may not be familiar with them because we haven't gotten to that part of the program yet, but what we are going to want to know from you at that point is which of these pillars of brain health are the toughest for you to be able to carry out in your life. So as we are looking here, it does look like our producers are not here to put our slides up on the screen. So we've got some behind the scenes scurrying around here with some of our friends from AARP to try to get the slides up. And I don't know if we're going to get them. Hey, but let's just start talking.
okay.
And then we'll catch up on the slides as soon as hopefully the producers are back with us. So, Saray, what is dementia? Can you give us the basics?
Yes, it's not a single disease, first of all. Um, Dementia actually encompasses a number of different types of dementia. Alzheimer's, of course, is the most common type and the one that you hear about most often. However, there are a number of other types of dementia. And just to start off, dementia in general means that there's a loss of cognitive or behavioral changes that impacts a person's life to the point that your activities of daily living are actually impacted. Okay. And cognitive function means things like your thinking skills, your problem solving skills, and of course, your memory are impacted by dementia. Um, Alzheimer's actually accounts for about 60 to 80% of individuals who do have dementia. And of course, it's the one that we talk about most often. Here is a slide that I love this slide. It has a picture of an umbrella. And under that umbrella are the various types of dementia that currently exist. There are other ones, however, and as I stated, Alzheimer's is the most common. Other types of dementia include vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontal temporal dementia, Huntington's disease, Parkinson's disease also can lead to dementia, and something called CTE, which stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is the type of dementia that you oftentimes see in athletes or military personnel or anyone who's had repeated concussions. You may recall the movie called Concussion that the actor Will Smith actually starred in. And it was a representative of this type of dementia. Vascular dementia is actually the second most common type of dementia and accounts for about 10% of the dementias that we have listed here. It is most common in African Americans. It also has to do with the blockage of small blood vessels to the brain. And depending on the part of the brain that is affected, it impacts your thinking ability. You can oftentimes see this type of dementia following a stroke or several mini strokes. It's also can be associated with other vascular conditions throughout the body, for like the heart, for example. Dementia with Lewy bodies has to do with a protein that is deposited into the brain. And it has symptoms that are very similar to Alzheimer's. However, other symptoms associated with this type of dementia include sleep disturbances, visual hallucinations, and visual spatial impairment. Lewy body disease was the type of dementia that Robin Williams had. And since his death in 2014, his wife has been very poignant about his experience with this type of dementia. Then we have frontal temporal dementia, which refers really to the part of the brain that's involved, the frontal part or the temporal part of the brain. This type of dementia typically affects younger people, younger than the age of 60. And characteristically, it presents usually with behavior changes, a change in the personality. It can also present with inappropriate behaviors or problem with language comprehension is oftentimes associated with frontal temporal dementia. As I stated, both Huntington's disease, which is a genetic condition, as well as Parkinson's disease, can also lead to dementia. Two key things, however, that are important to know is that dementia is not a normal part of aging. Dementia is not just about memory loss. Also, as I stated previously, depending on the part of the brain that is involved, whether it's the frontal temporal, whether or not you have vascular changes in various parts of the brain, will determine how dementia may present. So people who have dementia certainly can explain dementia and present with dementia in different ways. Sometimes sundowning. What that means is that as it gets later in the day, individuals living with dementia tend to sometimes get worse. They get disoriented, for example. And that is something that we refer to as sundowning. The important thing about this is that it's not all about memory loss, as I said, depending on what part of the brain is involved. So we know that the impacts of dementia are many. Many people, particularly in later stages have problems with things like organizing their checkbook or getting the right words to form. They have it in their brain, but it doesn't come out of their mouth. So they have trouble with language, concentration, and problem solving. For example, forgetting where you put something and not being able to retrack your steps to be able to find it, or putting things in inappropriate places is another thing that can occur with dementia. Balance and gait tend to be a big problem with people living with dementia, particularly as the condition gets worse. And falls are a leading cause of hospitalization in people living with dementia. And for some people, of course, there's the behavior issues, socially inappropriate behavior. There's a loss of your social filters. You may say things or do things that you never would have done if you were not living with dementia. You may curse when you never were someone who used those types of words, for example. And now, as I said, dementia is not a normal part of aging. The vast majority of adults do not have dementia. However, the older you get, the likelihood that you may end up with dementia does increase. The majority of people living with dementia are over the age of 75. Again, that does not mean that getting older is predisposing you to dementia, however. So, if you or a loved one are concerned about your mental health, your brain health, where do we start? First of all, talk to your doctor. You can actually ask for a simple test that is really done right in the office that can be a measurement of your cognitive impairment or not. Depending on how you score on that test, your doctor may want to refer you to a neurologist who may do more specialized tests, some diagnostic testing that can be done in terms of your thinking, your coordination, your reflexes, that type of thing. Sometimes people ask, why do I want the diagnosis of dementia if there's no cure for it? However, there are research projects going on all the time, as we know. There are new drugs that are being developed, and there are clinical trials that families can be involved in. But it's important to be able to know what type of dementia you have so that you can learn about it and help preserve and repair maybe relationships that you have. It's also important to be able to make informed decisions before dementia gets worse regarding your finances, your transportation, what your housing may look back like going forward. So planning for how you want to live your life differently is important, and that comes with early diagnosis. I'm going. Whoop. The other thing I wanted to show you, and I don't know what happened to that slide. I don't know if I can go back or not, but yes, there it is. I wanted to share with you the AARP Dementia Resource Guide for individuals and families. This is a guide that can direct you to different types of dementia where those resources may be available, let's say for Lewy body dementia, or of course for Alzheimer's. It can also direct you to perhaps resources, research resources that are available around the country. You can download this, or if you're in an area that has an AARP office, you can actually pick up a hard copy as well. But it's important to know that early diagnosis and intervention is key. And I think that brings us back to our group.
Yes, great. Thank you, Dr. Eaton, for that overview. And I want to mention also that that resource guide that you just talked about is available for people under the resource tab that is right under the screen as you're watching this presentation today. But, you know, thinking about what you just said, I think that too often our culture tends to think of dementia as a death sentence or, you know, maybe something to be ashamed of, rather than what it is, which is a chronic disease that a person's likely to live with for many years. And when we do that, when we miss out on opportunities for people to continue to live well with joy and purpose, I think we're really missing out as not just individuals, but families and communities, because we know it is possible for people to at least live better with dementia than so many people do now.
Certainly. Another thing that, if I can interject, is that there are other conditions that can present as dementia. Urinary tract infection is a big one, as well as medication interactions, medications that you may be taking that can cause some confusion. Even a B12 deficiency can be associated with some confusion and memory issues. So again, when we talk about where do we start, you start with your primary care physician.
Yes, yes, great words of wisdom. If there's something like that going on, you want to know what it is. You want to address it.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yeah. Well, you know, we've got Joy back up here with us, and I want to switch us over to the other, I think, really hopeful thing that we want to share with you today. The really good news that AARP is focused on sharing with as many people as possible. And that is that there have been tremendous advances in brain science in the past 10 or so years, especially. And the science now tells us that regardless of our age, there are things we can do to reduce the chance of age related diseases and optimize our chance of maintaining our cognitive health. Our brain is constantly changing and making new nerve cells. And this is really exciting. And so I'm glad we have Joy with us today to talk about AARP's Global Council on Brain Health and what everyone should know about the 6 pillars of brain health.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, back in 2015, AARP pulled together a group of scientists, health professionals, scholars, and policy experts to form the AARP Global Council on Brain Health. They basically took on the task of finding and reviewing the most effective, science-based information we have on how to maintain our cognitive health, particularly as we age. In other words, what can we do to keep our thinking skills, our reasoning abilities, memory, etc., as we age? Since 2016, the Global Council has brought together over 200 experts from 28 different countries, representing over 150 different universities and organizations, to reach a consensus on the state of the science of brain health. These efforts have resulted in the publications of, to date, 13 reports on brain health. And you'll notice that on the screen here that we've got, that just came up, there are 6 of those, but there are more. If you look at that, the link at the bottom, you'll be able to pull up the other reports that AARP and the Global Council on Brain Health has been able to put together, and will give you more information about what you can do and how you can help maintain your brain health as we age. So probably you recognize this person if you watch CNN. This is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and he's the medical correspondent for CNN. But he's also a brain surgeon. And one of the things that AARP has done is to partner with Dr. Gupta. And back in 2021, he came out with the book Keeping Sharp. So that's the blue one that's on the screen. And he basically kind of pulls together a lot of the information that we're going to be talking about, but also the results of some of the research that the Global Council has pulled together and how they've developed some of the things that we have. Earlier this year, Dr. Gupta released the orange one, the 12 Weeks to Sharper You. And basically that's a workbook that goes along with the Sharper one. So it helps you kind of identify and come up with a plan that's unique for you that will help you with coming up with a plan that's going to be effective for helping you maintain a better brain. So these are the 6 pillars of brain health. I have to say there's probably not a whole lot I'm going to be able to tell you today that you haven't already heard, but hopefully putting it in a different context will help you come up with a plan that's going to help maintain your health going forward. I also want to make sure that you understand that this is not just for people that currently are not showing signs and symptoms of memory impairment. These are for everybody. So these things that we're going to be going over are things that everyone can do regardless of your cognitive status at this point, whether you have dementia or not. These are things that are going to be able to help maintain and help you be able to continue with better brain health. So I'm here to remind you that your brain is a muscle. And a lot of times when we talk about keeping fit, we think about our body, but we don't always think about how that incorporates our brain into it. So I want you to start thinking about that this is a muscle that's connected to the rest of us, and it's important to be mindful of that as well. So the areas that we're going to be looking at and talking a little bit about are move, discover, nourish, connect, relax, and sleep. So the first one on here is move. Now, when we talk about exercise, we're not necessarily talking about you have to go and join a club and go work out every day. But all of the pillars are important. But Dr. Gupta feels that, and I have a tendency to agree with him, that we don't want to neglect the exercise part. And that doesn't mean, like I said, running to the gym and spending a lot of money or spending a lot of time and coming up with this elaborate plan. This means just moving around. So many of us have watches these days that if you sit too long, you get vibrated and you're supposed to get up and move. And that's important to do because one of the things about staying active and exercising is it keeps the blood flowing in the brain. It helps all parts of your body, not just your heart and your lungs and all those other kinds of things, but it helps your brain as well. Also, Dr. Gupta wants to remind us that right now there's really no magic bullet for keeping your brain healthy and maintaining your memory, as what often is described on TV with a lot of these things. There's no science behind a lot of the supplements that are out there right now. So what he recommends is rather than spending your money on expensive supplements is to maybe buy a good pair of walking shoes or running shoes and move about a little bit. Even small changes that you can make. And if you're watching TV, when the commercial comes on, get up and go get a glass of water. Or walk around the living room, or walk out to the kitchen, maybe not get an unhealthy snack, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can do really little things. Take the dog for a walk. Walk out to the mailbox instead of, driving by and picking up your mail. Those kinds of things. Because it's important when you're active, what it does is it helps repair and protect those chemicals in the brain. It also helps with your circulation. It keeps all of those things moving. It helps reduce anxiety. It helps your sleep. It also helps reduce the risk of diabetes, heart disease, and depression and stroke. And I want to remind you that the last few, that diabetes, heart disease, those are also risk factors for developing dementia. So the more we can keep going, the better we're doing. Also, the more active we are, the more physically fit we are in terms of strength, muscles and things like that in our legs and our bodies and our balance. Because as we get older, we're more prone or we're more at risk for falls. And currently, falls are one of the highest, or the number one incidents where folks are hospitalized, particularly with dementia, are the falls. So we need to be mindful of staying physically active. The next one is discover. So this is basically stay curious at the bottom. And we're all naturally curious. I mean, how often do you walk into a store and you see something and one of the things you do is you pick it up and you want to know all about it. So, but challenging your brain is, excuse me, is really important because, and not just in everyday kinds of things, but new ways. You know, when I first started working in this, and actually I've worked in this field for about 45 years, one of the things that was first that came out was the importance of doing crossword puzzles. And we found that doing crossword puzzles was a really good idea, but what it did is you really just got better at doing crossword puzzles because a lot of those skills weren't necessarily transferable to other parts of the brain. And like Dr. Eaton was talking about, different parts of the brain do different things. So what we want to do is we want to challenge different parts of the brain. And we can do that in relatively easy ways. Because one of the things when we're doing that is it also helps develop additional neural pathways, and that helps with a little bit of cognitive reserves. If we've got more neural pathways that we can rely on a little bit if something starts to go awry with one or the other. So challenging your brain in new ways may mean something as simple if you're right-handed, then do more things with your left hand, and vice versa. It might mean, pulling up YouTube and learning a new dance where nobody can watch you and you can move around just as well as you want to. Might be learning a new song, or it might be a musical instrument. It might be playing a challenging game. One of the things that I did this summer with my 14-year-old grandson is I started challenging him to play Wordle with me. And so we were going back on phones, and right now my vocabulary seems to be a bit larger than his. But his goal right now is to beat me. So even fun things like that, and getting to know different types of games or physical activity or pickleball. I was playing pickleball myself until I had a little issue with my knee, so I had to back off from that a little bit. But anything that you can do to challenge your brain in something that you haven't done before. You might want to take a class or teach a class. The other thing is to volunteer. The AARP is a wonderful place to volunteer, but there are a lot of places in your organization, in your locations that would be happy to have volunteers come in, and you can learn about what's going on with those different organizations. So there's plenty of things out there that you can use to help keep your mind busy and active. The number third pillar is nutrition. Now, most of you probably know that there's really not any specific diet, at least scientifically based, that's going to change everything. But we do know that brain health studies have found that there are certain diets that help support your brain health. So probably the first one you've heard about is the Mediterranean diet. Excuse me. That's been around for a long time. The second one is the DASH diet, and that stands for Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. The third one is the MIND diet. Now, you might not have heard as much about that one, and that's basically a combination of the Mediterranean and the DASH diet. And what that stands for is Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. So I would just stick with the MIND diet. But all of those really focus on a couple of things. Number one is eating less red meat and trying to keep an eye on sweets. And try and eat more fish, more nuts. These are more plant-based kinds of things, so beans and whole grains. When you think of vegetables, think of the more color that you can get in your diet, the better. And also look at some of the healthy oils like olive oil. Back in 2020, excuse me, the Global Council released a report on the brain-heart connection. It lists recommendations to manage cardiovascular risk to brain health. Studies also showed that a decrease in the incidence of dementia were simultaneous with the increase in cardio health. So basically, what's good for your heart is good for your head. So who knew all of our body parts were so well connected? The next pillar is the social piece, and this actually has this piece has actually been getting a little bit more attention than historically as I've been working in this area. But research shows that people who stay socially connected live longer and are more physically and mentally healthier. So what we're finding is, we're social creatures by nature. And what happens as we get older, a lot of times it becomes more and more difficult to stay social because of um, maybe mobility issues, maybe because of eyesight changes. Maybe you never learned to drive. There's a number of reasons that it can start to interfere with it. We also, as we get older, start to lose some of the friends that we've had for a long time. So it becomes easier, and not necessarily intentional, to become more and more socially isolated. But we're finding that when people get isolated, they also increase their risk of depression and some of the other things that go along with that. So what we want to do is try and stay as social as you can. So engage with friends or family and see what kinds of things you can get involved with. Look to volunteer. Try and meet new people of all ages, and so that, again, you can. Those can be some of the things that will help exercise your brain a little bit more when you're out in social events, when you're having conversations. Volunteer again in your community. If you have a pet, that's great. Take that pet for a walk, and so you can get some exercise and social connections at the same time. I don't know about you, but when I'm out with my pet, somebody always comes out and wants to talk about, what kind of a pet I have and how long I've had them and that kind of thing. A memory cafe. If you're not familiar with memory cafes, they're locations that folks can go. They were started in the UK for folks that were living with dementia to kind of normalize the social environment. And so there's generally care partners, folks living with dementia. They get together either for coffee, board games, card games, all kinds of stuff. And people usually really enjoy being there and have a good time. So it's important to try and avoid that isolation so that it doesn't have a negative effect on your brain health. The next one is to relax. Stress is pretty hard on your body. A little bit of stress is a nice motivator. A lot of stress is debilitating because it pushes your body into that fight or flight response, and that takes up not only your energy, but it can, in over a period of time, if it's not addressed, can impact your immune system. It can impact your digestion. It can impact a lot of things. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on that. And you notice some of the things that are listed here are pretty much things that we've talked about before. So meditation, Tai Chi, deep breathing. Now the deep breathing one, I always have to chuckle because people think, oh, well, I know how to breathe. But what happens when we're under stress and anxiety, we start to breathe more shallowly. And so what that does is it starts depleting the oxygen from your brain and from the rest of your body. So stopping and pausing and just taking a deep, like 4 or 5 deep breaths in through your nose and then out through your mouth can actually help lower your heart rate, and it helps reduce that stress. And I mentioned anxiety, and right now there's a lot of anxiety. Everybody seems to be concerned, and rightfully so, about all of the things that are going on in our world right now with hurricanes and floods and COVID and political environments and all kinds of things. It's hard not to feel anxious sometimes, but thinking about what you can do to control that and what tools you have to help diminish that and reduce that. And breathing is an easy one of them. Also, if you can go for a walk, spending some time in nature's a great way to help reduce that. And then watching maybe TV shows or YouTube or whatever you like to watch on TV that makes you laugh. And then I always tell people to smile, because that physical act of smiling can actually make you feel better. And plus, when you smile to somebody that's not expecting it, I always tell it makes them wonder what you've been up to. So have some fun with it. So the next one is sleep. And what sleep does is it helps really restore and relax and recharge us. So sleep, we hear lots of stuff about sleep going on right now because people are struggling with sleep a lot of times. But what we want to do is try and get at least 7 to 8 to 10 hours of sleep, because not only does that restore us, but it also, during the night when we're sleeping, is it helps wash those, it helps the brain kind of wash out the chemicals and things like that it's accumulated during the day. So it really is something that's important for our overall health, not just our brain health. It's important to try and maintain a regular sleep schedule, particularly if you're having difficulty falling to sleep or staying asleep. So a certain time, start early so that you've got some time to decompress, and then try and stay on that schedule as much as possible. Be careful about drinking caffeine after 3 o'clock. Also, alcohol. That glass or two of wine, if you're drinking it in the evening, can also interfere with your sleep. A lot of folks will wind up 2 or 3 hours later, they're waking up and can't fall back to sleep. Be careful about sleeping pills, because oftentimes people report that they're tired in the morning, and if you're groggy and not able to move about too much, then you're going to have risk at falling. So these are the 6 pillars of brain health. Remember that mind-body connection, and so stay active, be curious, make sure you try and eat a few good things in there, stay connected with friends and family and social events, try and relax, and then get some good sleep. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Joy. So to put it all together, even though science doesn't have all the answers yet, we know there are at least steps that we can take to improve our brain health.
Absolutely. A lot of times we feel like things are out of control, and it's just hard to know where to start sometimes because you have a lot of information coming at you. And I always try and encourage people to do just maybe 1 or 2 things. You don't have to make changes all at once. So maybe you want to add a walk to your routine this week, or maybe you want to call a friend that you haven't talked to in a long time. So it doesn't need to be big steps. It just needs to be a step. They always say a journey starts with just 1 step. So any of these things are reachable. Dr. Gupta's book certainly is going to be helpful to help lay out a plan that's going to work for you. And the resources with AARP, all of the work that they've done with the Global Council are amazing. So there's a lot of resources that are easily available.
When I think about the 6 pillars of brain health, the one that especially stands out for me is sleep. Getting a full night's sleep has so many benefits, and yet we as adults in modern America are really horrible at it. I think as a society, we've done ourselves some real damage by undervaluing sleep. It's this incredible tool available to us as humans to help balance and maintain both our physical and our mental health. And yet we too often just don't make use of it. And we even tend to glorify people being able to get by with only a few hours sleep per night, even though the science shows us that people are more productive and tend to live longer, healthier lives when adults get their 8 hours of sleep per night. So, Joy, is there one of these pillars that you found more difficult or more important in your own life?
I don't think that any of them are more important than the other because they're all so interconnected. I would have to say, though, for me, I've always had a sweet tooth. So I think in general, I eat pretty well. But I also know that that's kind of my Achilles heel is having chocolate in the house too much. Or having ice cream in the house too much. Yeah. So the way that I manage that is I just don't keep it in the house, because I'm pretty weak when it comes to those kinds of things. I don't deny myself those things, but I just am mindful of it, and I set it up in ways that I don't feel terribly guilty when I do get an ice cream cone or something like that. But it's hard. It's hard to change habits.
Yeah. So everyone at home, which of these 6 pillars of brain health tends to be the most difficult for you? Is it exercise or eating right, sleep, managing stress, staying socially connected, learning new things? There's a poll question on your screen underneath the video that's playing here. You'll see a tab called poll, and you can indicate which one of these 6 pillars is the most challenging for you, which will help us as we plan for future AARP programs. But I know we have a lot of questions that have come in the chat already, and so I'd like to invite Dr. Eaton to join us again on the screen, and we'll answer your questions. And I'm going to try to go through as many as we can here. So, you know what, just quick here, I'll give you everybody again a reminder when you're in the tabs underneath the screen and you're filling out your poll. You can also continue to put chat questions in the chat box, questions or comments. But let's start off with Stephen. I see Stephen had asked us a question about FTD, frontotemporal dementia, and he had asked about how common is that one? And if we look at the Association for Frontotemporal Dementia, their organization is one of the organizations that's listed in that dementia resource guide that Dr. Eaton mentioned. That guide references, and it has the website for the FTD organization, which I recommend. But according to that Association for FTD, about 10 to 20% of all cases of people with dementia are FTD. So they say 10 to 20% of the dementia cases are FTD. Then, you know, so we heard, like Dr. Eaton said, 60 to 80% are Alzheimer's. It gets kind of fuzzy though, because there are often people that will get a diagnosis of one thing and then they'll find out later they have a different diagnosis. And some people will have more than one type of dementia at the same time. But to Stephen's question, about 10 to 20% is the estimate from that organization. And then I know we had a question from Barbara about that simple test that people can ask their doctor about. Dr. Eaton, would you like to tell us a little bit more about that for Barbara?
Certainly. That is called a mini mental status examination. It's a one-sheet paper. There's 21 questions on it that you answer. And depending on how many of those questions you answered correctly, you come up with a score. If you answered all 21, then you're good, all right? Even if you got only, let's say 19 or 20. But as that number decreases in terms of the ones that you answered correctly, it raises certainly concerns that you're having some issues with your cognitive decline. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would like to add to that too, that the mini mental is it's not a definitive test. It's a
Correct.
screen to identify, like what Dr. Eden was saying, that if you score a certain level on that test, is an indication that you probably want to get that checked a little bit more, and that generally means meeting with a neuropsychologist that can do a more comprehensive test that gives you more information about where some of those deficits might be and what some of the things that you can do about that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple of questions about COVID in dementia, and I see Betty and also Karen talked about or asked, did we see more COVID or did we see more dementia diagnoses following COVID? And then also, I think it was Karen who had talked about the impact of isolation and such on COVID. I know we do have a report from the Global Council on Brain Health about COVID and brain health. So when you look under the resources tab, we have a link to that Global Council on Brain Health Resource Library where you can get that report. But Saray and Joy, what have you seen as impacts of COVID?
Well, one of the things that that has been reported is the impact that long COVID can have on you mentally. As far and long COVID, as you know, is COVID that continues to resolve but gives you symptoms over time. A lot of that has to do with your thinking, and you're able to do complex information. Yes, tasks. Thank you. Uh, um, but that's the only thing that I'm know about long COVID and how it may impact you mentally. Joy, did you have something else?
Yeah, a little bit. I still have a number of friends that are employed in long term care that are directors of memory care and things like that. And during COVID, it was pretty detrimental on a lot of our folks that were living with dementia because of the isolation. Even though people were living in congregate settings, they were isolated in their rooms. They weren't able to see their families. So routines were totally mixed up. People were wearing the masks. So folks living with dementia weren't able to read those facial cues and things like that. So it became really difficult, and there was a huge decline in cognitive statuses for folks, as well as increases in people passing away, people losing their lives. Now, some of that may have been directly related to getting COVID, but all of them have pretty much said that they experience very similar situations where cognitively people really kind of took a nosedive because of those very issues that are important for people to stay connected, to stay on those routines, to be socially engaged and that sort of thing, and how important that was. And by becoming isolated, it really took a toll. So,
yeah. Other stories that we hear, in talking with people, it did seem like people who were living with dementia seemed to go downhill faster when they contracted COVID. I know a lot of the science is still coming out on that. One of the things I know at AARP that we've been talking about in particular are the risks of contagious disease in general in nursing homes, and looking to make sure we don't see the kind of tragedy we saw during the COVID pandemic with people living in these densely populated, congregated settings like that. There's a concept called greenhouses, a different sort of a model for long-term care for folks that would need a long-term care residential setting that I know AARP has been talking a lot about, especially in the wake of COVID. But a couple other questions I want to move on. We've got some questions from Jennifer and Peter about nutrition and sweets. Peter's asking, where do fruits fit into diet? And then, kind of related, not exactly, Jennifer is asking, is an increased craving for sweets a symptom of dementia? And is there science about this? So.
I'm not, if there is, I'm not aware of it. We do, as we age, certainly our taste changes, and things like salt and sweet can sometimes become more pronounced. And so we have a tendency to navigate into those areas, and Dr. Eaton can probably certainly speak to that. So some of that may be related to that. When we think about sweets, though, when we talk about, I mentioned about chocolate, and I try not to keep too much of it in my house. Those are generally processed sugars. So, fruits and vegetables and things like that. Think about in terms of not adding sugar to existing kinds of things. And I don't know, Dr. Eden, if you have other things to add to that.
No, I certainly would agree with that. Processed foods, particularly as it pertains to sugar, is something to be avoided. No, I certainly would agree with sticking with your whole foods. Now, fruits and vegetables, as Joy alluded to in her nutrition piece, are essential, and those are the type of things that you actually want to eat.
I think one thing I would like to add to that too is that, we didn't talk anything about roughage and bulk and things like that, and gut health and all of those kinds of things that are extremely important as well. And so when you're eating fresh fruits and vegetables, you're also getting that roughage.
I certainly agree with it. Any types of processed food?
I was hearing some in the background, sorry. But also just staying with those fruits and vegetables and things like that has other health benefits other than just the sweetness or that has the roughage in which impacts your digestive system, your glucose levels, all of those kinds of things.
Great. So, and we got a question, kind of a different direction from David. We talked about what seems to be this lack of social filter that we'll see in people with types of dementia. Any ideas for dealing with that? And I wanted to mention one thing, and Saray or Joy, you can join in. One of the things that the organization National Council for Dementia Minds, again, in our resource guide, talks about, and one of the things that our AARP Memory Cafe that we have in the Lansing, Michigan area, Ethel's Place, that we focus on is recognizing and letting people be their true selves, being open about, saying, you know what, I have dementia. Or if you're with somebody, family member, letting it be known, I have dementia. It's not me, it's the dementia talking. And part of what we're trying to do in talking about dementia and brain health more and more is to reduce the stigma, so it's more comfortable for people to be able to do that. Because we know that because of fear of outbursts or saying socially inappropriate things, we often see people living with dementia and their care partners becoming more and more socially isolated, which just leads to that deterioration, because we need to keep social as one of our 6 pillars of brain health. So, actually, I guess we are getting kind of close on time here. Boy, this hour has just gone by so quickly. But before we go, I want to ask our guests one final question, and then I want to remind all of you at home to tune in again for the next 3 episodes in this series. For the month of October, we're going to be here every Thursday at the same time, 11 o'clock Eastern. And you won't want to miss our next episode in particular. Next week on October 12th, I'll be joined by these 4 really amazing guests. Dr. Jason Karlowicz, who is a physician and an author and the director of the Penn Memory Center, and he's on the Governance Council of the Global Council on Brain Health. And he'll be joined as well by 3 recently retired physicians who are now themselves all living with dementia. And they're going to offer their perspectives on both sides of the desk, from both sides of the desk. It should help us as far as getting some insight and tips on how to talk with our doctor. I know there were more questions we had about that, but how to talk with our doctors about Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, and how to get a diagnosis and the types of care and services that you or your loved one needs. So I think if we didn't get a chance to answer questions today, there's going to be an opportunity to ask some of those same types of questions when we're together again next week. But Saray, what's the one thing above all that you hope people at home will take away from today's program?
Hope. I would say that hope is so important, that especially next week when you see the individuals that are living with dementia, it is amazing the things that they still do, the things that they still learn, the hope that they have. And so hope would be the one thing that I would take away.
Absolutely. Joy, what about you? What's the one thing you hope people at home will take away today?
Well, I certainly would agree with Dr. Eaton, but also that it's important, and I was reading some of the comments and people asking, if I do this, will this help? And I think probably the biggest takeaway is it's a combination of all of them. We're not a one-trick pony, and we can't expect one thing that we do to compensate or to replace everything else that we know is healthy to do. So yes, reading is good. It's not the only thing. All those things are not necessarily transferable, but have fun with it. I mean, we've got to do a lot of things anyway, so have fun with it. And as as we interact with folks that are living with dementia, remember that it's not just the person with dementia that needs to adapt and adjust, it's the care partners that need to adapt and adjust. And a better understanding of what someone might be living with dementia has to say is really important, and that it's a continuum. It can take 20 years from that initial signs and symptoms of someone showing signs of memory impairment to getting to a point where it's pretty obvious that the person needs a lot more support than they used to. So there's a lot of space in between there. So particularly being mindful of that and being aware of that.
And I also want to share our poll results just briefly. When we asked people what's the most difficult pillar for you, we had people who picked each of them, but 30%, the highest number, was getting enough sleep. And the next highest was 20% said eating healthy. So yes, check and check. As for me, the one thing that I hope that people will leave today with is a feeling of empowerment. Because regardless of our age, there are things we can do. We don't have to feel powerless. We just need to start with small steps and do something every day. So that's all for now. Be well, and we'll see you here next week. Thanks for joining us.